I've heard from a lot of people that he's not going to disrupt the trajectory that the Biden administration is on. He's an implementer. He's not going to input his ideology. This is what I've heard from people who, are in a position to know. But, there's a different tenor. Implementation is super important. We've talked about it a lot. That mostly happens at the agency level. The White House can sort of put pressure, but it does mostly happen among the agencies. But there's this big looming fight out there that I think is going to be the major thing that the White House is going to be dealing with for the next 6 months. And having someone who was a corporate executive who ran a conglomerate that was not unlike Warren Buffett's conglomerate at a place called the Cranmere Group, which had some run-ins with Medicare fraud. I'm not sure that this is super ideal, especially given that Klain kind of set a standard of being a pretty good chief of staff.
I've heard that he's a really nice guy, though. Let's put this clip. This is from. It's been a long time. I didn't even know they were still doing their show. But Pod Save America. And, this is, let's play this clip. And this is sort of the most disturbing type of commentary, in my estimation, like where somebody sort of has a personal relationship and just found him pleasant around the office.
Care.gov. There's the criticism from progressives are saying Jeff is too close to the business community. He made money in healthcare and the private sector. They're concerned about that focus. I think those are very fair things to raise and to point out. But I also know that when we worked with him, he fought for increases in minimum wage, overtime pay. And I also think that Jeff will think that his job is to implement the Biden agenda. He's not coming in there with some determination to advance some, corporate interest that is more important to him. No, he's there to serve Joe Biden.
Yeah, if Jeff Zients ends up helping Biden make a bunch of pro-corporate decisions, then the criticism is well warranted. I generally have a problem with criticism that is only about someone's past and resume and not about the actual decisions and policies they have implemented during their time in government. I think those should be a subject of criticism. And like in terms of Jeff, not only did he oversee the NEC during some of Obama's most progressive economic policies, the push for some of the most progressive economic policies, he ran the Biden transition and helped hire some of the more progressive people in the Biden administration. Pramila Jayapal, who runs the Congressional Progressive Caucus, she talked to Semaphore about this. She said, we really appreciated Jeff's collaboration on COVID policies, on the American Rescue Plan, which both included bold and progressive policies. Yep. So you see the actual progressives in Congress are feeling pretty good about him. You get some lefty activists and media types who are upset, but that's, to be expected.
Hey, listen, I think it's good, voice these things now and then hold them accountable. I also,
Okay. So did the COVID stuff really work out that well? I mean, here's the point.
That is interesting because it sort of elided that. I forgot he did run the NEC during Obama's time in government, but I have heard the same thing about, he wasn't in charge of the transition, but he was, involved in the transition, involved in some of the hiring. And certainly we saw, to some degree, some decent.
But let me ask you this. But in terms of the role of the chief of staff, right? Klain was there, it seems to me, on day one or prior to day one, in terms of being the chief of staff.
Yeah.
Will you explain to people what the chief of staff does? Because it's not the idea that the chief of staff is just implementing Biden's policy, but not in any way shaping it it seems to me to be not true. I mean, just the position itself, it changes depending on who the person is, but the idea that Klain didn't make a difference. The Klain was just there, you could have put anybody in there, and to the extent that there are good things that come out of the Biden administration, completely irrelevant to that, Ron Klain. That seems to me to be very hard to believe.
It's different in every White House, right? I mean, the power dynamics of every White House change depending on the personalities of the people involved. Klain obviously was someone who had the respect and the authority to really dictate a lot of the politics that the White House engaged in. and he had good relationships with sort of every faction of the Democratic Party, and listened to them and took their advice and played it out. It changes. It depends. Someone like, obviously, Rahm Emanuel was a chief of staff, and he was a big personality and meant a lot to, the ways in which the Obama administration at that time engaged in tactics. During these debt limit and fiscal cliff negotiations, Bill Daley, who was a J.P. Morgan Chase executive, was the chief of staff of the White House. And I think that the desire for a grand bargain, is reflected in Daley's concerns and interests. You can have other chiefs of staff. Certainly like under Trump, the chief of staff really didn't matter. It was like a name. Reince Priebus wasn't really getting a lot done in the Trump White House. So it depends on the various personalities involved. The claim is that Zients is just going to be, a functionary, right? He's
right.
His opinions aren't going to matter at all. I find that a little hard to believe.
It's ridiculous. And the idea that the critique is not based on his record is a straw man that they were putting up there in Pod Save America. The critique is, of course, his record. You mentioned the COVID stuff. He oversaw the complete bungling of the response during the Omicron wave, didn't order extra PPP. And then you can go back and critique him on his role in the Obama administration, a more pro-austerity, more pro-deficit hawkery member of that staff. So no one's critiquing him because he has an associate. I mean, that's, I think, informative that he was a part of of corporate America and big business. The critique is on his record primarily. And
I don't think you have to go to his corporate past to have concerns.
There you go. Yeah.
About. Yes.
And isn't there also, aren't we also talking about, the chief of staff is the primary filter for what the president sort of the information, the meetings, the people that the president gets. It seems to me that you can make that filter determines who's coming in to the office, what information Biden's getting, how Biden perceives what's going on outside. It's like if I put a red gel on the window of the White House, he's looking out. Biden's gonna be like, this seems a little bit red out there. Or I put a blue one. It's like, hey, things are looking a little chillier out there. That makes a big difference.
It's like saying that Bradley doesn't matter, right?
Historically, chiefs of staff are somewhat gatekeepers. That also changes from White House to White House. I know there are some big personalities in this White House. The staff secretary is someone who literally hands the paper and gets it on the Resolute desk, and that is Neera Tanden in this White House. So there are gatekeepers at various levels that you have to deal with. During the Obama administration, the National Economic Council director, when it was Larry Summers, was very much the gatekeeper there. And by the way, the NEC is probably changing. Brian Deese is leaving. There's talk of Lael Brainerd, who is at the Fed right now and is pretty respected there, coming over, which is probably bad for Fed policy more than it is good for the NEC. Right. But you have this jumble, right? And ultimately, someone who Biden has a close relationship is going to get more authority there. And Biden worked hand in hand with Zients. He entrusted the transition to him. He worked with him when he was in the White House in the Biden in the Obama administration, particularly on fiscal cliff and economic policies. Biden was the liaison between the White House and Congress on a lot of those deals. And so, and what we know about his instincts, Biden's instincts, was one of giving up the farm. I mean, giving away leverage that Congress thought they had, Democrats in Congress thought they had at that time. And so, it's not just so much Zients coming in, but this pairing, of when we're going into this negotiation. And you're right, though, that there is this gatekeeper function.